Katie Morrison sat in the back row of the advanced xenobiology classroom, her chin resting on her hand as she stared out the large window into space. The stars looked so peaceful from Luna Base, tiny dots of light scattered across the black void. She never got tired of looking at them, even after 6 months at the educational facility. The classroom held 24 students from different human colonies across the galaxy. Katie came from New Iowa, an agricultural world where her family grew crops to feed other settlements. Most of her classmates came from mining worlds, trading stations, or military bases. They were all here to learn about alien species and prepare for careers in the expanding human territories. Dr. Helen Carter stood at the front of the room, pointing to a holographic display showing different alien creatures. She was a kind woman in her 50s with graying hair and patient eyes. She had spent 30 years studying alien life forms and genuinely loved teaching young people about the wonders of the galaxy. As you can see, Dr. Carter said, gesturing to an image of a tall blue-skinned alien, the Altarians are completely peaceful. They communicate through color changes in their skin and have never shown any aggressive behavior toward humans or other species. Katie's friend Jake Collins raised his hand. He was a red-haired boy from the asteroid mining colonies who always asked good questions. Dr. Carter, why are some aliens afraid of humans? I heard my dad talking about species that won't trade with us. Dr. Carter paused for a moment, choosing her words carefully. Well, Jake, humans are relatively new to galactic society. We've only been traveling between stars for about 50 years. Some older species remember when they first left their home worlds and how difficult that transition was. They think humans might be going through growing pains. Amy Rodriguez, Katie's roommate, spoke up from the front row. But we're not dangerous, right? I mean, we're just trying to learn and explore like everyone else. Of course not, Amy, Dr. Carter smiled. Humans are curious and determined, which some species find surprising. But dangerous? Absolutely not. We're explorers and builders, not conquerors. Katie listened to the conversation but found her attention drifting back to the window. Something felt different today, though she couldn't explain what. The stars looked the same, and Luna Base hummed with its usual quiet activity. Maybe it was just homesickness. She missed the wide-open fields of New Iowa and the smell of growing corn. The lesson continued with Dr. Carter showing images of various peaceful alien species. There were the gossamer, who looked like floating jellyfish and communicated through light patterns. The corvin reminded Katie of walking trees, tall and slow-moving, but incredibly wise. Each species had found its place in the galactic community, through cooperation and trade. The most important thing to remember, Dr. Carter said, is that the galaxy is vast enough for everyone. There's no need for conflict when there are millions of worlds to explore and settle. Suddenly, a low alarm began ringing throughout the base. It started as a gentle tone, the kind used for routine drills, but then it changed, becoming urgent and harsh. Red lights began flashing in the corridors outside their classroom. Dr. Carter frowned and walked to her communication panel. This isn't scheduled, she said, pressing buttons to contact the base command center. Static came through the speakers. Katie felt a chill run down her spine. She had never heard that particular alarm before, and the red lights made everything look wrong, almost scary. Around her, the other students began looking at each other with confusion and growing worry. Dr. Carter called out Ben Walsh, a nervous boy from the Outer Rim colonies. What's happening? Before Dr. Carter could answer, the base's main communication system crackled to life. A man's voice, tight with stress, filled the classroom. All personnel, this is Commander Davis. We have multiple unidentified ships approaching Luna Base. All students and non-essential personnel report to evacuation stations immediately. This is not a drill. The blood drained from Dr. Carter's face. She quickly moved to her desk and began pulling up emergency protocols on her computer. Everyone stay calm, she said, though Katie could hear the worry in her voice. We've practiced this. Form 2 lines and we'll head to Evacuation Bay 7. But as the students began to stand, another announcement came through the speakers. This time the voice was different, panicked and breathing hard. Emergency. Emergency. Hostile ships have breached the outer defense grid. They're jamming our communications. All evacuation shuttles are grounded. Repeat, we cannot evacuate. All personnel find secure locations and await further orders. The room fell silent except for the continued wailing of alarms. Katie looked around at her classmates' faces and saw her own fear reflected back at her. Jake's freckled face had gone pale. Amy was gripping the edge of her desk so hard her knuckles were white. Dr. Carter's hands shook as she tried to contact base security. Come in, security station. This is Dr. Carter in classroom 7. We have 24 students here who need protection. Only static answered her. Through the large window, Katie saw something that made her stomach drop. Ships were moving in the distance, sleek and dark against the starfield. They were too far away to see clearly, but they moved with purpose toward Luna Base. These weren't human ships. Their design was all wrong. Too angular and predatory. Dr. Carter, Katie said quietly, there are ships outside. The teacher moved to the window and looked out. Her face went even paler. Everyone get away from the windows. Move to the center of the room behind the desks. Who are they? Amy asked, her voice small and scared. Dr. Carter was quiet for a long moment watching the approaching ships. I don't know, she finally said. But we need to seal this room and wait for help. Katie helped her classmates push desks together to create a barrier. As they worked, she kept thinking about Dr. Carter's lessons about peaceful alien species. The approaching ships didn't look peaceful at all. They looked like they were built for one purpose: war. The base shuddered as something impacted the outer hull. Then again harder. Through the sealed door, they could hear running footsteps and shouting voices in the corridors. The attack had begun, and there was nowhere to run. Dr. Carter pressed her hand against the door control panel, sealing the classroom with a heavy click. The thick metal door was designed to protect against hull breaches, not hostile boarding parties, but it was better than nothing. She turned to face her students who had gathered behind the makeshift barrier of overturned desks. Listen to me carefully, she said, trying to keep her voice steady. We're going to wait here until base security can reach us. Stay quiet and stay together. Katie crouched behind a desk with Jake and Amy. She could hear her heart beating in her ears, almost drowning out the alarms that continued to wail throughout the base. The lights flickered as something else impacted the station's hull. Dr. Carter, whispered Lisa Park, a girl from the research colonies. Who would attack a school? We're just kids. Before Dr. Carter could answer, a new sound reached them through the sealed door. Heavy footsteps, but wrong somehow. They were too measured, too purposeful. And there was something else. A clicking sound like claws on metal. The footsteps stopped outside their door. Dr. Carter motioned for everyone to stay down and moved quietly to her communication panel. She whispered into it. Security station, this is emergency classroom 7. We have hostile contacts outside our door. Please respond. Still nothing but static. A loud bang echoed through the room as something struck the door from outside. Then another. The heavy metal began to show small dents. Whatever was out there was incredibly strong. Katie noticed her hands were shaking. She looked around at her classmates and saw the same terror in their faces that she felt. Ben Walsh was crying quietly. Amy was holding Jake's hand so tight her fingers were white. The banging stopped. For a moment, there was only the sound of the alarms and their own frightened breathing. Then they heard a new sound, a high-pitched whining like machinery warming up. They're cutting through, Dr. Carter said quietly. A thin line of sparks appeared along the edge of the door as some kind of energy weapon began slicing through the metal. Dr. Carter looked around the room desperately. There was nowhere to go. The classroom had only one exit and no windows that could be opened to space. They were trapped. Everyone stay behind the desk, she ordered. No matter what comes through that door, stay down and don't move. The cutting continued, sending showers of sparks into the room. Katie could smell burning metal. The line of light moved steadily around the door frame, and she realized they only had minutes before whatever was outside would break through. She looked at the things scattered around the classroom. Chairs, computer tablets, some lab equipment, books. Nothing that could be used as a weapon against whatever was strong enough to punch dents in a metal door. Wait. One of the desks they had overturned to make their barrier had broken when it fell. A leg had snapped off, leaving a piece of metal about 2 feet long with a jagged edge where it had broken. Katie quietly reached for it and pulled it close to her. Katie, what are you doing? Amy whispered. I don't know, Katie admitted. But I'm not just going to sit here. The cutting was almost finished. The door was barely hanging in place. Dr. Carter stood up and moved toward it. Stay back, Jake hissed. Dr. Carter, get down! But their teacher shook her head. I'm responsible for all of you. Maybe I can reason with them. With a crash that shook the entire room, the door fell inward. Smoke and sparks filled the air, making it hard to see. But through the haze, a shape appeared in the doorway. Katie had never seen anything like it. The creature stood nearly 8 feet tall. covered in dark, scaled skin that seemed to absorb light. Its arms ended in claws longer than her fingers, and its head was narrow and predatory, with eyes that glowed yellow in the smoke. It moved like a hunter, every step controlled and purposeful. Behind it, more shapes appeared. Katie counted at least 3 more of the creatures. Dr. Carter stepped forward, her hands raised peacefully. "Please," she said, "we're just teachers and students. We're not a threat to anyone. These are children." The lead creature looked at her with those glowing eyes. When it spoke, its voice was deep and rough, like grinding stone. "Humans, dangerous predators, must be eliminated." "No, you don't understand," Dr. Carter said desperately. "We're not dangerous. We're peaceful. These children have never hurt anyone." The creature moved faster than Katie thought possible. One moment Dr. Carter was standing there, trying to protect them. The next she was on the floor and the creature's claws were red with blood. "Dr. Carter!" Amy screamed. The sound seemed to trigger something in the creatures. They moved into the room like a pack of hunting animals, spreading out to surround the students behind the desks. Katie heard her classmates crying and pleading, but the creatures didn't seem to care. One of them stepped toward the group of younger students huddled in the corner. Lisa Park looked up at it with tears streaming down her face. "Please don't hurt us," she whispered. The creature raised its clawed hand. Something inside Katie snapped. She didn't think about being scared or about the fact that she was just a 16-year-old farm girl from New Tuyodo, Iowa. She only thought about Lisa and Amy and Jake and all the other kids who were about to die. Katie stood up from behind the desk, gripping the broken table leg in both hands. "Hey," she shouted. All 4 creatures turned to look at her. She saw surprise in their glowing eyes, as if they couldn't believe their prey was standing up to them. "You want to fight someone?" Katie said, her voice stronger than she felt. "Fight me." The lead creature made a sound that might have been laughter. It turned away from Lisa and started walking toward Katie, its claws gleaming in the flickering light. Katie raised the broken table leg and tried to remember everything her grandfather had taught her about fighting. He had been a soldier before humans reached the stars, and he always said the most important thing wasn't being the biggest or strongest. It was being willing to keep fighting when everyone else gave up. The creature lunged at her, and Katie discovered just how willing she was to fight. The creature's claws whistled through the air where Katie's head had been a split second before. She dropped low and swung the broken table leg up as hard as she could, catching the creature in what she hoped was its knee. The impact sent vibrations up her arms, but the creature stumbled backward with a surprised snarl. Katie didn't wait to see if she had heard it. Her grandfather's voice echoed in her memory. "When you're outmatched, you keep moving and you keep hitting until you can't anymore." She rolled to the side as another creature lunged at her, its claws scraping sparks from the metal floor. The broken table leg wasn't much of a weapon, but it was solid metal, and she was angry enough to make it count. She swung it like a baseball bat, connecting with the second creature's arm and hearing something crack. Around her, she could hear her classmates crying and calling her name, but everything seemed far away. The only thing that mattered was the next creature moving toward her, and where she needed to hit it to make it stop. Dr. Carter had taught them about alien anatomy in their xenobiology classes. Most species had similar weak points: joints, nerve centers, areas where major blood vessels were close to the surface. Katie found herself remembering those lessons as she dodged another swipe of deadly claws. The lead creature had recovered from her first attack and was circling her now, its yellow eyes filled with what looked like confusion. These creatures were hunters, built and trained to kill prey that ran or cowered. They didn't know how to react to prey that fought back. Katie used that confusion. When the creature expected her to back away, she stepped forward and drove the jagged end of the table leg toward its center mass. The creature twisted to avoid the strike, but not quickly enough. The metal scraped along its scaled hide, leaving a dark line of blood. "Impossible," the creature growled. "Human juveniles do not fight." "This one does," Katie said through gritted teeth. She was breathing hard now, and her arms ached from the impacts. These creatures were bigger and stronger than her, but they were also predictable. They attacked like wild animals, relying on size and fear to overwhelm their prey. Katie's grandfather had fought in the colonial wars before faster-than-light travel, and he had always said that smart fighters beat strong fighters. The third creature tried to grab her from behind while she was focused on the leader. Katie heard its claws scraping on the floor and spun around, bringing the table leg up in a sweeping arc. The blow caught the creature across its narrow head, and it crashed into the wall hard enough to crack the metal paneling. But there was still one more, and Katie was getting tired. The fourth creature had been hanging back, watching her fight the others. Now it moved in with careful, measured steps. This one was smarter than the others, learning from their mistakes. Katie backed toward the center of the room, trying to keep all the remaining creatures in sight. Her makeshift weapon felt heavier with each swing, and she could feel cuts on her arms where claws had come too close. But behind her, she could hear Jake and Amy and the others still breathing, still alive. That was all that mattered. The smart creature feinted left, then attacked from the right. Katie saw the move coming and tried to counter, but she was a fraction too slow. Claws raked across her shoulder, tearing through her school uniform and drawing blood. The pain was sharp and immediate, but it also did something unexpected. Instead of weakening her, it made her angrier. These creatures had killed Dr. Carter, a woman who had never hurt anyone in her life. They had come here to murder children who were just trying to learn about the galaxy. The pain in her shoulder turned into cold, focused rage. Katie stopped retreating. When the smart creature moved in for what it thought would be a finishing strike, she stepped inside its reach and drove the broken table leg up under its jaw. The creature's head snapped back with a wet crack, and it dropped to the floor and didn't move. The remaining two creatures stared at her with what she was beginning to recognize as fear. They had come here expecting easy prey, young humans who would run and hide and die quietly. Instead, they had found someone who refused to give up. "You want to know what humans are really like?" Katie asked, raising the bloody table leg. "We protect our own." The leader and its remaining companion exchanged glances. They were reconsidering their attack, and Katie could see uncertainty in their glowing eyes. These creatures were hunters, but they were also smart enough to recognize when a hunt had gone wrong. Behind her, Katie heard Jake's voice, barely a whisper. "Katie, there are more of them in the hallway." She glanced back and saw he was right. Through the destroyed doorway, more yellow eyes gleamed in the smoke-filled corridor. The creatures she had been fighting were just the first wave. Katie felt a moment of despair. She had barely managed to handle 4 of them, and now there were more coming. Her shoulder was bleeding, her arms ached, and the broken table leg was starting to crack from the impacts. But then she looked at her classmates huddled behind the overturned desks. Amy was trying to stop Ben from crying. Jake was holding Lisa's hand. These were her friends, kids she had spent months getting to know and care about. They were depending on her. Katie turned back to face the doorway and raised her weapon again. "Come on then," she called to the creatures in the hallway. "Let's see what you've got." The leader of the first group made that grinding laugh sound again. "Brave human juvenile. But bravery will not save you from the apex hunters." "Apex hunters?" Katie asked. "We are the greatest predators in the galaxy," the creature said proudly. "We have hunted and killed entire military units. You are just one small human with a broken stick." Katie smiled grimly. "You know what your problem is? You think being a predator is about being the biggest and scariest thing around. But humans figured out a long time ago that the best predators are the ones that never give up." More creatures entered the room, spreading out to surround her. Katie counted at least 6 now, all moving with the careful precision of experienced killers. The odds were impossible, but she had come this far. She thought about her grandfather's stories about human soldiers who had held impossible positions against overwhelming odds. She thought about her parents on New Iowa, who worked from dawn to dusk to feed the growing human colonies. She thought about Dr. Carter, who had died trying to protect her students. Katie Morrison was a farm girl from a peaceful agricultural world. She had never wanted to be a warrior, but sometimes life didn't give you a choice about who you had to become. The new creatures that entered the room were different from the first group. They moved with even more precision, and their scales seemed darker, almost black in the flickering emergency lighting. But what made Katie's blood run cold was the way they looked at the bodies of their fallen packmates. Their yellow eyes showed something she hadn't expected: respect. The largest of the new arrivals stepped forward, and Katie immediately knew this one was their leader. It stood at least a foot taller than the others, with scars across its hide that spoke of many battles. When it moved, the other creatures automatically gave it space. "I am Vex Prime," the creature announced, its voice deeper and more controlled than the others. "Alpha of the 7th Hunter Pack. We have eliminated 12 human military installations and 47 civilian settlements. Never has prey killed my hunters." Katie kept the broken table leg raised, though her arms were shaking from exhaustion. Blood from her shoulder wound was running down her arm, making her grip slippery. There's a first time for everything. Vex Prime studied her with intelligent eyes. You fight with unusual tactics for a human juvenile. Our intelligence suggested your species becomes helpless when separated from adult protectors. Your intelligence was wrong, Katie said. The pack leader made a gesture, and the other creatures spread out in a wider circle. Katie realized they were no longer just trying to kill her quickly. They were treating her as a genuine threat, adapting their tactics. Jake, she called softly, not taking her eyes off Vex Prime. Can you get everyone to the laboratory section? There's another exit through the supply room. We're not leaving you, Jake replied firmly. You have to. Get them out of here. But before anyone could move, Vex Prime spoke again. There is nowhere to run, human juvenile. My pack controls all sections of this facility. Your kind will be eliminated completely, as ordered by the Zephyrian Empire. Katie felt a chill that had nothing to do with her injuries. The Zephyrian Empire? Why would they want to kill human children? Because humans are dangerous predators, Vex Prime said matter-of-factly. Your species spreads across the galaxy like a plague, conquering and consuming. The Empire has decreed that all humans must be eliminated before you can threaten the civilized races. That's insane, Katie said. We're explorers and farmers and teachers. We've never attacked anyone. Vex Prime's scarred head tilted slightly, yet you stand before me covered in the blood of my hunters, wielding a primitive weapon with skill that surprises even me. If you are not a predator, what are you? Katie looked down at the broken table leg in her hands, slick with blood. Some of it hers, some of it belonging to the creatures she had killed. When had she become someone who could kill? A few hours ago, she had been worried about her xenobiology homework. I'm someone who protects her friends, she said finally. Admirable, Vex Prime acknowledged, but futile. The pack leader gestured again, and two of his hunters moved toward the group of students. Katie started to intercept them, but two more hunters blocked her path. She realized with growing horror that Vex Prime was forcing her to choose. She could fight the ones attacking her, or try to save her friends, but not both, unless she changed the rules of the game. Katie looked around the classroom, trying to see it not as a place of learning, but as a battlefield. The overturned desks provided some cover, but not enough. The computer terminals might have useful components. The emergency lighting cast confusing shadows that could be used for concealment, but what caught her attention was the laboratory section that Jake had mentioned. Dr. Carter had always been proud of her fully equipped xenobiology lab, complete with specimen preservation chemicals, analysis equipment, and emergency safety systems. Amy, Katie called out, remember what Dr. Carter taught us about the emergency protocols in the lab? Amy's eyes widened with understanding. The chemical shower system. If there's a contamination alert, it floods the whole lab section with neutralizing agents. Can you get everyone there and trigger it? What about you? Katie smiled grimly. I'm going to buy you some time. Vex Prime had been listening to their exchange with growing interest. Clever human juvenile, you seek to use your environment as a weapon. This is why the Empire fears your species. You adapt too quickly. If you're so afraid of us, Katie said, backing slowly toward the lab entrance, why don't you just leave us alone? Because fear is wisdom, Vex Prime replied. Your species is young and seemingly harmless now, but in 1,000 years you will be the greatest threat the galaxy has ever known. Better to eliminate that threat while you are still weak. Katie felt a flash of anger. So you're murdering children because of something we might do centuries from now? Precisely. The cold certainty in Vex Prime's voice told Katie everything she needed to know. These creatures weren't just following orders. They genuinely believed humans were too dangerous to live. There would be no reasoning with them, no mercy, no chance for surrender. Katie reached the entrance to the laboratory section and glanced back to see her classmates moving quietly toward the other exit. Most of them were out of immediate danger, but Jake and Amy were still in the main classroom, unwilling to leave her behind. Go, she shouted. Vex Prime moved then faster than anything that large should have been able to move. Katie barely managed to dodge his claws as she rolled into the laboratory. The pack leader followed her, and she could hear the other hunters spreading out to surround the lab. The laboratory was larger than the classroom, filled with equipment and specimen containers. Katie had spent countless hours here learning about alien life forms, never imagining she would one day be fighting for her life among the same tables and displays. She grabbed a container of preservation fluid and hurled it at Vex Prime. The glass shattered against his scaled hide, and the chemical burned like acid where it touched. The pack leader roared in pain and anger. "Chemical weapons," he snarled. More proof of human treachery. Katie didn't bother to explain that it was just preservation fluid for dead specimens. She was too busy running for the chemical storage cabinet, dodging claws and trying to remember everything Dr. Carter had taught them about laboratory safety. Some chemicals exploded when mixed. Others produced toxic gases. All of them were clearly labeled with their effects and proper handling procedures. Katie had always been a good student, but she had never expected her grades in xenobiology to be a matter of life and death. She reached the storage cabinet just as one of the other hunters cornered Jake and Amy near the emergency exit. Without thinking, Katie grabbed 2 bottles of reactive compounds and hurled them at the creature. The resulting explosion sent it crashing into the wall and opened the exit for her friends. "Now!" she yelled. "Run!" Jake hesitated for a moment, meeting her eyes across the smoke-filled laboratory. In that look, she saw him understand that she wasn't planning to follow them. He grabbed Amy's hand and ran. Katie turned back to face Vex Prime and his remaining hunters. She was alone now, surrounded by some of the deadliest predators in the galaxy, but she was also standing in a room full of volatile chemicals, emergency systems, and equipment she knew how to use. "Just you and us now, human juvenile," Vex Prime said. "No more clever escapes." Katie picked up a new chemical container and smiled. "You know what your real problem is? You think like predators from 1,000,000 years ago. Hunt, kill, eat, repeat. But humans learn to think differently. How so? We learn to turn everything around us into a weapon." Katie threw the chemical container at the nearest hunter, but this time she wasn't aiming to hit it. The glass shattered against the wall behind the creature, and immediately the air filled with a thick, choking smoke. She had learned in Dr. Carter's safety lectures that certain preservation chemicals created dense vapor clouds when exposed to air. The hunters moved through the smoke with difficulty, their enhanced senses working against them now. Katie could hear them hissing and snarling as the chemical vapors irritated their eyes and respiratory systems. But she had grown up on a farm where her father used similar chemicals for crop protection. She knew how to work in this environment. Moving quietly through the artificial fog, Katie made her way to Dr. Carter's main computer terminal. Her teacher had shown them the laboratory's emergency systems during their first week of classes: fire suppression, chemical containment, and atmospheric controls. Katie's fingers flew over the keyboard as she activated the emergency ventilation system. Powerful fans roared to life, but instead of clearing the smoke, Katie had reversed their settings. The system began pulling air from the main classroom, where several more hunters were still stationed, and pushing the chemical vapors throughout the entire section of the base. Vex Prime's voice echoed through the artificial fog. "Clever human juvenile, but you only delay the inevitable." Katie didn't answer. She was too busy at another computer terminal, accessing the laboratory's specimen storage systems. Dr. Carter had collected samples from dozens of worlds, some of them quite dangerous, even when preserved. The storage containers were designed to keep hazardous materials safely contained, unless someone with the proper access codes deliberately released them. Katie found what she was looking for: a collection of spore samples from Kepler 442b, a fungal organism that Dr. Carter had warned them was extremely aggressive when exposed to moisture and heat. The classroom sprinkler system would provide the moisture. The emergency lighting systems were already generating heat. She activated the specimen release protocol and dove for cover behind a heavy equipment table as containers throughout the laboratory began opening, with soft hissing sounds. "What have you done?" Vex Prime demanded. Through the smoke, Katie could see the tall form of the pack leader moving toward her position. His yellow eyes glowed like lanterns in the artificial twilight, and despite the chemical irritants, he moved with deadly purpose. "I'm showing you what humans are really like," Katie called back. She clutched the broken table leg in both hands, her makeshift weapon now cracked and bent from the impacts of their earlier fight. The first of the released spores began to take effect. The aggressive fungal organism spread rapidly in the humid environment, covering surfaces with a slick, sticky substance that made footing treacherous. Katie heard one of the hunters slip and crash into an equipment rack, But Vex Prime kept coming, adapting to the changing environment with the skill of a master predator. "You fight well for prey," he acknowledged as he approached her hiding spot. "But this ends now." Katie rolled away from his position just as massive claws tore through the metal table she had been hiding behind. She came up running, heading for the far end of the laboratory where the most dangerous equipment was stored. Dr. Carter had always been careful to keep the high-energy analysis tools locked away from student access. The molecular disruption scanner could break down organic compounds at the atomic level. The plasma spectrometer generated temperatures hot enough to melt steel. All of them were protected by multiple safety systems that could be overridden in an emergency. Katie reached the secured equipment area and began entering override codes, her fingers moving automatically through procedures Dr. Carter had drilled into them for theoretical emergencies. Around her, she could hear the other hunters struggling with the environmental hazards she had unleashed, but Vex Prime was still closing in. "You cannot win, human juvenile," the pack leader said. "We are the apex predators of this galaxy. We have hunted species across 1,000 worlds." "That's your problem," Katie said without turning around as she worked at the control panel. "You think being a predator is about being the biggest, fastest, strongest thing around." The molecular disruption scanner came online with a low, threatening hum. "But humans figured out something important a long time ago," Katie continued. "The most dangerous predator isn't the one with the biggest claws or the sharpest teeth." She spun around to face Vex Prime, holding not her broken table leg but a handheld molecular disruption unit she had removed from the scanner. The device was never meant to be operated outside of its protective housing, but Katie had grown up repairing farm equipment. She understood how machines worked. The most dangerous predator is the one that never stops adapting. Vex Prime lunged at her, claws extended for a killing strike. Katie pressed the activation stud on the disruption unit. A beam of coherent energy tore through the air between them, striking the pack leader center mass. The effect was immediate and devastating. Vex Prime's forward momentum carried him past Katie's position, but his predatory grace was gone. He crashed into the wall and slumped to the floor, his enhanced physiology no match for human technology. The laboratory fell silent except for the hum of machinery and the distant sound of the base's alarms. Through the smoke, Katie could see the shapes of the other hunters, but they were no longer moving with deadly purpose. The chemical vapors, environmental hazards, and the loss of their pack leader had broken their coordinated attack. Katie stood in the center of the devastated laboratory, holding her improvised weapon and breathing hard. Blood still ran from the claw marks on her shoulder, and her school uniform was torn and stained. The broken table leg lay at her feet where she had dropped it to grab the disruption unit. She was 16 years old. 3 hours ago, she had been worried about her upcoming exam in interstellar politics. Now she stood surrounded by the bodies of creatures that the galaxy considered the ultimate predators. Through the smoke, she heard a familiar voice calling her name. Katie, are you okay?" Jake and Amy appeared in the doorway, along with several other classmates and 2 adults in base security uniforms. The cavalry had finally arrived, but the battle was already over. "We heard explosions," Amy said, staring around at the destroyed laboratory. "We thought—" "I'm okay," Katie said, though she wasn't sure if that was entirely true. She felt different somehow, changed by what she had been forced to do. "Is everyone else safe?" "All accounted for," one of the security officers confirmed. He was looking at the fallen hunters with amazement. "How did you manage this?" "These are apex hunters. They've wiped out entire military units." Katie looked down at the broken table leg at her feet. Such a simple thing to have started with. Just a piece of furniture that had broken when they overturned the desks. But in the hands of someone who refused to give up, even a broken stick could become a weapon. "I protected my friends," she said simply. The security officer shook his head in wonder. "Command is going to want a full report on this. The whole galaxy needs to know what happened here." Katie picked up the broken table leg and held it in her hands. It was cracked and stained now, but it had served its purpose. She thought about Vex Prime's words about humans being dangerous predators that needed to be eliminated before they could threaten the galaxy. Maybe he had been right about humans being predators, but he had been wrong about what that meant. The galaxy was full of creatures that hunted for territory, for food, for dominance, but humans hunted for something different. They hunted to protect the people they cared about. That made all the difference. The evacuation ships arrived at Luna Base 6 hours after the attack began. Admiral Frank Hughes stood in the docking bay watching the rescue teams bring out survivors, his weathered face grim with the knowledge of what they expected to find. In 30 years of military service, he had seen the aftermath of apex hunter attacks. There were never any survivors. That's why the report from the security team made no sense. "Run that by me again." "Lieutenant," Admiral Hughes said to the young officer who had contacted him from the educational facility. Lieutenant Morris cleared his throat nervously. "Sir, we have 21 student survivors from Classroom 7, all protected by a single 16-year-old girl named Katie Morrison. She killed 12 apex hunters, including Vex Prime himself." Admiral Hughes had fought apex hunters during the siege of Proxima Station. He had lost 2 full companies of trained Marines to a pack half the size of what had attacked Luna Base. "Lieutenant, I want you to think very carefully about what you just told me." "Sir, I've verified it with multiple witnesses and recorded evidence from the classroom security systems. The footage is remarkable." 20 minutes later, Admiral Hughes stood in the ruins of the xenobiology laboratory, staring at the bodies of creatures he had only seen in classified military reports. Vex Prime lay against the far wall, his massive form struck down by what appeared to be an improvised weapon. Katie Morrison sat on a medical gurney nearby, having her shoulder wound treated by a Navy medic. She still held the broken table leg in her free hand, refusing to let anyone take it from her. She looked like any other teenage student except for the blood on her torn uniform and the steady, unflinching way she met his gaze. "Miss Morrison?" Admiral Hughes said carefully. "Can you tell me what happened here?" Katie's voice was quiet but clear. "They killed Dr. Carter. They came to kill all of us." "I couldn't let that happen." The Admiral looked around the devastated laboratory. Scorch marks covered the walls. Chemical residue made the air shimmer. Equipment worth millions of credits had been converted into improvised weapons by a farm girl from New Iowa. "How did you know to use the laboratory equipment this way?" he asked. "Dr. Carter taught us about emergency procedures. My grandfather taught me about fighting. I just put them together." Admiral Hughes had read Katie's file during the flight to Luna Base. Straight A student, no military training, no combat experience. Her grandfather had been a colonial Marine, but that hardly seemed sufficient to explain what he was seeing. "Miss Morrison, do you understand what you've accomplished here? Apex hunters are considered the most dangerous predators in known space. Trained military units have been wiped out by smaller packs than what attacked this facility." Katie looked down at the broken table leg in her hands. "They weren't that dangerous. They just didn't know how to adapt when things didn't go according to their plan." From across the room, Jake Collins called out, "Admiral, you should know that Katie saved all of us. When those things came through the door, she was the only one who stood up to them." "She didn't have to," added Amy Rodriguez. "She could have hidden with the rest of us. But she fought them so we could escape." Admiral Hughes studied Katie's face, looking for some sign of the trained killer she would have had to be to accomplish this. Instead, he saw a tired, scared teenager who had done what she felt was necessary to protect her friends. "The Zephyrian Empire is claiming that humans are dangerous predators who need to be eliminated," the Admiral said. "This attack was part of a larger campaign they're calling the Purification War. They say we're too violent and unpredictable to coexist with civilized species." Katie's expression hardened. "And what do you say?" "I say they might have a point." The words hung in the air for a moment before Admiral Hughes continued. "Miss Morrison, in the past 6 hours, you've done something that entire military units couldn't accomplish. You've proven that humans, when pushed to their limits, can be the most dangerous predators in the galaxy." "I didn't do it to be dangerous," Katie said firmly. "I did it to protect my friends, I know. That's what makes it so terrifying from the Zephyrian perspective." Admiral Hughes gestured to the bodies around them. "They came here expecting to easily eliminate a group of helpless human children. Instead, they found someone who turned a classroom into a battlefield and a broken piece of furniture into a weapon of war." The medical team finished treating Katie's wounds and cleared her for movement. As she stood up, she continued to grip the broken table leg like a talisman. "What happens now?" she asked. Admiral Hughes looked at his communication device, which had been buzzing with urgent messages for the past hour. News of the Luna Base incident was spreading through human space faster than military communications could travel. The recording of Katie's fight was being broadcast on every human world. "Now, Miss Morrison, you've started something that's going to change the galaxy. The Zephyrian Empire wanted to prove that humans are dangerous predators. You've just provided them with all the evidence they need. Katie's face went pale. I've made things worse? On the contrary, Admiral Hughes said with a grim smile. You've made things clear. The Zephyrians declared war on us because they feared what humans might become. You've shown them what we already are when our families are threatened. He activated his communication device and pulled up the latest intelligence reports. In the 6 hours since your fight ended, 3 more human colonies have been attacked. But something interesting has happened. The colonists fought back. Farmers with agricultural equipment, miners with industrial tools, teachers with classroom supplies. Every single attack has been repelled. Because they saw what I did. Because you reminded them what humans are capable of when we refuse to give up. Admiral Hughes looked around the laboratory one more time. The Zephyrians thought they were starting a war of extermination. Instead, they've started a war of awakening. Katie followed his gaze to the fallen form of Vex Prime. He said humans would be the greatest threat the galaxy had ever known. Maybe he was right. Maybe he was. But there's a difference between being a threat and being a monster. Admiral Hughes turned back to her. You could have killed those creatures in any number of ways. You could have enjoyed it or felt proud of your victory. Instead, you fought only to protect others, and you feel the weight of what you had to do. It doesn't feel like a victory, Katie admitted. That's how I know you're still human, Miss Morrison, and that's why the galaxy has nothing to fear from our species. As long as we remember the difference between protecting and conquering. The evacuation shuttle was ready to depart. As Katie walked toward it, still carrying her broken table leg, Admiral Hughes received one final message from Fleet Command. The Zephyrian Empire had just broadcast a galaxy-wide statement condemning the savage violence of human children and calling for increased military action against human settlements. But attached to that same message was something unexpected. Peace. Overtures from a dozen other alien species who had seen the recordings from Luna Base. They had watched a human child fight, not for conquest or glory, but to save her friends. They had seen what human predatory nature actually meant when directed toward protection rather than aggression. The war with the Zephyrians was far from over. But the galaxy's perception of humanity had fundamentally changed in the span of 6 hours. All because a farm girl from New Iowa had refused to let evil triumph in her classroom. Admiral Hughes watched Katie board the shuttle, her broken table leg still clutched in her hand. In military academies across human space, that piece of furniture would become legend. Future officers would study her tactics and her adaptability, but more importantly, they would study her restraint. The fact that she had fought only as much as necessary and no more. Katie Morrison had become the face of human military capability. But she had also become something more important. Proof that humans could be the galaxy's greatest protectors, not its greatest threat. The shuttle departed Luna Base, carrying its passengers toward safety. Behind them, the educational facility stood as a monument to both the best and worst of galactic civilization. A place where beings had come to learn about the wonders of the universe, and where that learning had been threatened by those who chose fear over understanding. But most importantly, it stood as proof that sometimes the most ordinary people could become extraordinary when they refused to let darkness win.